The palace doesn't sleep. Not really. You step into the quiet of Goryeo-era Korea, sometime around the 12th century. The night air is cool and silken, sliding over stone like a whispered apology. You don't need to. The air here already smells like decisions, incense, and soup. The moon, full, plump, maybe slightly smug, hangs above the tiled rooftops, turning every curve of the royal eaves into calligraphy. You're in the inner court of the palace, somewhere near Gyeongsang, the capital. Not that anyone calls it that out loud, but that's all right. Neither did several court scholars who reportedly fell asleep mid-poem after a particularly strong infusion. A gong echoes faintly from the outer gates, a signal that the fourth watch of the night has begun. It tells the palace scribes you're a person of rare taste. Time to dim the lanterns, hush the gossip, and most importantly, prepare the tea. Yes, that tea. You probably won't make it through this day. She carries a lacquered tray. On it, a delicate ceramic teapot, 2 cups, a folded cloth, and a pouch of herbs that smells like the inside of a good memory. Before we begin, if you like stories that smell faintly of cinnamon, ink, and rainwater on stone, you should probably like and subscribe. And leave a comment with your current location and local time. We like to know where our night travelers are listening from. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The fire is warm, the pot is steeping, and history is, as usual, just one sip away. You hear footsteps, soft, slippered. A court attendant approaches her robes, rustling like wind in reeds. A cat sits on a column base, eyes closed, contemplating power. You envy it. This is no ordinary tea. This is Yucca medicinal tea, brewed from an elaborate array of roots, petals, seeds, and good intentions. The shadows play across silk wall hangings depicting cranes, pine trees, and scholars deep in thought, or possibly just trying to stay awake. Tonight's blend, the handwriting slopes gently downward like the poet got drowsy halfway through. A well-rested monarch made better decisions, had more balanced ki, and was less likely to start philosophical debates about peach trees at 3 a.m. Mulberry leaf for calm. There was even a phrase nobles would whisper before lying down, who keeps an entire room of scrolls, just to decide what to sprinkle into the emperor's cup, depending on the phase of the moon and the intensity of his size. Juju fruit for dreamless sleep, lotus seeds for inner clarity, and a pinch of roasted barley for warmth and humility. All ingredients chosen by the palace physician, of course. As you walk through the courtyard toward the main hall, the stone is still warm from the day's sun. Inside the hall, candlelight flickers in bronze lotus-shaped lamps. You pass a low writing desk. On it, a brush, a stack of paper, and a half-written poem about the sound of wind and bamboo. One major fact: the Goryeo royal court took its sleep hygiene extremely seriously. Sleep was not just a personal affair, it was political. One lesser-known tidbit: during the Joseon Dynasty, it was considered impolite to fall asleep without first acknowledging the tea that guided you into slumber. May the leaves fold before I do? Historians still debate whether that line was meant to be poetic, sarcastic, or a subtle complaint about the quality of the herbs. You sit cross-legged on a cushion. The tea is poured. The aroma rises, earthy, floral, gently bitter. Like regret, but with honey. You sip. The room quiets. The moon glows slightly brighter, just to show off. After tea comes silence. Or rather, the curated version of silence, because no royal residence is ever truly quiet. Somewhere, a servant coughs delicately into their sleeve. A scribe's brush squeaks softly on parchment. In the garden beyond the paper screens, a single frog tries to convince the others it's still summer. You remain seated, warm now from the tea. The cushion beneath you is stuffed with pine needles and rice straw, just firm enough to remind you this is a palace. Not a tavern, Eleanor, no, not Eleanor. You're not in Victorian England anymore, remember? You're in the palace of King Injong, a careful ruler, fond of calligraphy, mildly allergic to turnips. Not too bright light disturbs rest. Not too dim shadows encourage ominous dreams. There's an entire protocol around lamp brightness. It's documented in the proper order of restful administration, a 200-page guide on how to facilitate ideal royal sleep. Just the quiet preparation of a royal bed and a little more yakka. No one has actually finished reading it. To maintain the room's tranquility, smooth sheets, check temperature, and on rare occasions, recite sleepy poetry. Mostly about moonlight, sometimes about ducks. A court lady gently adjusts the angle of the lamp beside you. One of the ducks is slightly cross-eyed. This was either an artistic choice or the painter's own protest to harmonize the spleen, someone once wrote, and the reasoning stuck. Somewhere, one of them probably has its own opinion on jujube tea. On a nearby stand, a covered bowl contains more sleep aids, slices of dried persimmon, a handful of pine nuts, and curiously 2 pickled plums. Everything here is intentional. Nothing exists by accident. Tonight, there will be no audience. No state matters. One historical fact that might surprise you: many young ladies of the court took this tradition extremely seriously. The Goryeo court had sleep assistants. Their official title, calm attendants. Their job, you glance at the painted screen near the bed. It's an image of a mandarin duck pair, a symbol of loyal love and balanced dreams. A quiet laugh escapes you. The court lady glances over, smiles. Sleep, after all, is not always solemn. The tea is cold now. You're not sure when that happened. But your hands are warm, your breath slower. You hear the rustle of reeds from the inner garden. There are carp in the pond. The bed itself is being prepared mattress of layered cotton, a headdress carved from sandalwood, and a light coverlet printed with chrysanthemums. Even the sound of the wind through the paper windows seems pre-approved. One obscure cultural detail: there were rumors in the court that drinking lotus tea on the first full moon of winter allowed you to dream of your future spouse. Others just used it as an excuse to drink extra tea and blame their snoring on fate. Historians still debate whether the tradition had any true belief behind it, or if it was just one more poetic distraction in a palace full of restless hearts. You shift on the cushion, your shoulders soften. The warmth from the tea lingers behind your ribs, and for a moment, you understand why people once believed the right combination of herbs and moonlight could change your entire destiny. The fire dims, the shadows lengthen, and the night, like your thoughts, begins to drift. You rise slowly from the cushion, joints mildly surprised but compliant. The fire behind you crackles once, then retreats into silence, as though it too knows it's time to wind down. You follow the court lady down a long, lacquered corridor, bare feet brushing across polished wood that reflects the lanterns like puddles of light. You pass a screen painted with 9 dragons, each one twisting through clouds, searching for something: power, peace, maybe a proper nap. The 9th dragon is rumored to have been modeled after the king himself. It does look a bit sleepy. Your room tonight is modest by royal standards, a private chamber just past the eastern wall known as the Dreaming Pavilion. It's not used often anymore. Reserved for nights when the king or a favored guest is believed to be carrying a heavy heart. Layers of soft cotton, embroidered sheets, and a cushion so precisely fluffed it might pass for diplomatic work. You are evidently that guest. Inside, the room smells of pine smoke and bamboo oil. A small writing desk sits under the window, inkstone and brush already laid out in case inspiration strikes mid-slumber. You will not be using it. The bed has already been prepared. On the small nightstand, another cup of tea awaits. This one is different. Tonight's second blend, chrysanthemum and licorice root for tension. The scent curls up, sandalwood and star anise with just a whisper of ginger. You catch your reflection in the lacquer of the desk. The person looking back at you seems content, and just a little blurry around the edges. The belief was that warm liquid could carry burdens downward through the body into sleep, where they would dissolve by morning. Pear skin for clarity, angelica root for warmth in the joints. But here and now, it doesn't matter. Mugwort, though not used tonight, was said to summon your ancestors into your sleep, sometimes with advice, sometimes with unsolicited commentary, and a single dried jujube floating like a memory. The calm attendant lights a cone of incense and sets it on a small jade dish. You inhale, you feel your spine loosen, your thoughts become soup. One curious fact, the palace herbalists didn't just choose herbs for function, they chose them for their dream symbolism. Chrysanthemum meant serenity, angelica meant remembrance. The fire crackles again, one lesser-known ritual of the Goryeo court, whispering one's worries into a cup of tea before drinking it. You whisper something into your tea. You don't even hear it yourself, but the tea nods, like it understands. Historians still debate whether these customs were practiced daily or saved for especially restless nights. You drink, you lie down, and the bed accepts you. Sometime in the middle of the night, the wind changes. You hear it slip beneath the roof tiles, move gently across the paper windows, and rattle the reed mats just enough to remind you are still here, still in the palace, still in the cocoon of careful rituals and warm liquid wisdom. You open your eyes, only briefly. The room is lit now by moonlight alone, silvering every edge, turning the lacquered desk into water and the curtain tassels into falling stars. There's a sound in the courtyard, not a threat, just movement. You rise not out of worry, but curiosity. Her hair is pinned up with a single silver comb. She's crouched beside a stone basin, washing fresh herbs in silence. The door slides open without resistance, and you step into the outer veranda barefoot. The wood is cold but familiar. And there she is, the head herbalist. Dressed in midnight blue robes, sleeves embroidered with plum blossoms. She sees you, nods once, doesn't speak, especially the dried ones. She pulls out a bundle of omiya berries, 5 flavored fruit that taste of sweet. Sour, bitter, salty, and pungent all at once, like the 5 moods of a tired poet. These are for tomorrow's dawn tea, she says. Her voice is low and gravel smooth, like someone who's boiled more water than she's spoken words. They'll wake the body before the mind, she adds. You crouch beside her, watch her hands. Careful, but not slow. Every herb is treated like something alive, even the dried ones. You couldn't sleep? She asks, not unkindly. I was dreaming of ducks, you say, before you can stop yourself. She smiles. Then you chose the right tea. In practice, they were guardians of sleep, keepers of health, and silent advisors to anxious kings. One lesser-known practice of the royal herbalists: inside, dry ginseng, a few persimmon petals, and what appears to be a pine needle. They kept dream journals of their patients. If the same dream returned more than 3 times, it was matched to a plant, not to fix the dream necessarily, but to walk with it more gently. She hands you a small sachet. For memory, she says, and for forgiving what you forgot. You don't ask how she knew. You just bow slightly. Historians still debate how much power these women held in court. On paper, they were servants. You return to your bed. The sachet is warm in your hand. You tuck it under the pillow. The pillow sighs in approval. You close your eyes. And this time, the sleep comes not like a command, but like a friend who waited up just for you. Morning arrives like a whisper, not a blaring trumpet, not even a decisive knock. Just a shift in the air, the faintest glow behind your eyelids, and the distant sound of a mock deck being tapped somewhere near the temple hall. The shadows in your room have retreated to their corners. The sachet of herbs still rests beneath your pillow, warm as breath. You open your eyes to pale light. Outside, you hear the sound of silk brushing stone, footsteps of a palace attendant moving with ceremonial slowness. She carries a tray of warm water and a folded cloth. Not a word is spoken. She bows once, leaves the tray, and disappears like she was never real to begin with. It smells faintly of mugwort and cedar. The tea tray awaits you, again fresh cup, this time steaming with a new morning blend. You sit up, body slow but not reluctant. You've been softened overnight, like rice left to steam. Your robe is where you left it, folded by the bed. Elmia berries, pear blossom, and pine pollen. But you are offered a small brush and parchment anyway. To wake the eyes, to soften the throat, to remind the spine it has work to do. You sip. The taste is layered, sweet and sour at once, like an apology with excellent timing. The royal sleep record was an official document, compiled each morning by calm attendants and herbalists, then handed over to palace astrologers who interpreted it with grave, well-moisturized faces. One major historical fact: Goryeo-era monarchs often started their day with 2 things, tea and a reading of dreams. If the king dreamed of snow in summer or cranes circling clockwise, it could result in anything from canceled meetings to new marriages. It reads simply, walk as though the earth were asleep. You obey more or less. You, fortunately, are not the king. Too much conversation before infusion was considered dangerous to the harmony of the heart. Naturally, this rule was broken constantly by poets. You may write your dream, says the new attendant quietly, or simply remember it kindly. You choose the second option. You dip your hands in. The water is infused with plum blossom and a few scattered green tea leaves, swirling lazily like clouds in a scroll painting. The sun is just beginning to touch the edge of the courtyard tiles. Long shadows stretch across the stone like sleepy cats. You wander past the morning wash basin, a wide stone bowl carved with cranes and mountains. Steam rises gently from the warm water. You rinse your face, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel like the sky could tilt. Behind you, a monk walks by holding a wooden tablet. One peculiar cultural detail: in the Goryeo court, nobles were discouraged from speaking more than 7 words before tea. Historians still debate whether this was a formal rule or a very passive-aggressive joke passed down through servant circles. You return to the veranda. The garden is washed in morning gold now. Cranes calm the distance. The tea in your hand is still warm, and your dream, whatever it was, lingers gently in the curve of your thoughts. Later in the morning, you are summoned, politely, gently, as if the very idea of a request needs your permission to exist. The head herbalist, yes, her again, has asked you to visit her yak bang. The building ahead is low, modest, and somehow older than memory. The sign simply says, House of Leaves and Fire. You follow a stone path behind the palace kitchens, winding past pomegranate trees, bundles of drying reeds, and a lazy cat who seems to be guarding a basket of ginger. Inside it's warm. The air smells of boiling licorice, pine ash, fermented plum, and something sweetly indecipherable. Shelves line the walls, clay pots, silk-wrapped sachets, scrolls tied with horsehair twine. Some roots she handles tenderly. Others she tosses with judgment. An iron kettle simmers on a charcoal stove in the corner, murmuring something confidential to itself. You came, the herbalist says, not looking up. She's seated at a low table, sorting herbs by color, shape, and personal drama. She gestures for you to sit. You do. I want you to learn today's tea, she says, not to drink it, but to understand it. She lays out today's blend in separate piles. Solomon's seal root for balance, dried quince for clarity, black sesame for warmth, a single pine nut for memory. She holds up the pine nut like it's a jewel. Once to greet the fire, once to bless the water, and once to remind the herbs that their work was not in vain. This, she says, reminds the tea who it's for. You say nothing because that feels like the right thing to do. They bloom in sync. The scent fills the room, earthy, citrusy, ancient. One odd tradition, she explains. Before making tea, the herbalist would tap the pot 3 times. She does so now. Tap, tap, tap. The kettle hums in response. You watch as the ingredients are lowered into the simmering water one by one. You breathe it in and feel a shift. Let it speak, she says. The tea always knows something you forgot. You sip, and for just a moment, you remember something soft. You carry the tea with you as you step back into the morning. The cup is warm in your hands, but not in a demanding way. It doesn't command attention, it offers it. Like a wise old friend who simply walks beside you, humming gently. The path curves toward the Yuan Hall, the Royal Medical Chamber, though calling it a chamber is a bit generous. The smell of yuja peel and roasted barley fills the air. A humor wheel, hand-painted, with 5 cardinal energies: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, each paired with a season, an emotion, and a tea. It's more of a spacious pavilion with open walls and slatted windows, where breezes are considered part of the treatment plan. Inside, scrolls, dried herbs, low tables, and 2 elderly men in indigo robes debating whether spleens prefer early or late tea. You are greeted with a bow. The herbalist follows, placing a second kettle on the brazier. The room becomes instantly cozier. One of the physicians gestures to a diagram pinned to the wall. He points to water. Winter, he says, fear. He points to earth. Late summer, thoughtfulness, or worry if you steep too long. There is an uncomfortable silence where someone nearly makes a pun about emotional overbrewing. Thankfully, the moment passes. Notes from monks. Drawings of herbs with annotations like, for quieting the angry stomach, or use only on nights when dreams are sharp. One major historical fact: the melody rises, dips, and never apologizes for its slowness. Goryeo medicine drew heavily from both native Korean practices and early Chinese Taoist theory. Her robe was simple, her hair bound with a ribbon the color of dried lotus petals. Balancing Qi and Sin wasn't abstract philosophy, it was a daily task. Food was medicine, sleep was sacred. Tea was both. No signature, just touch. It was believed the healer's intention transferred through skin. You're handed a small linen-bound book. Its title, The Night Infusions of the Southern Provinces. Inside are recipes, of course, but also poems. The song tells a story not when you've heard, but when you feel. A soft arrival, a steeping, a warming, a letting go. One obscure cultural tidbit: some herbalists marked their most successful recipes with a single fingerprint. You run your finger along the edge of the cup. There is a print, not yours. As you leave the Yuan Hall, the wind carries the sound of string music. Somewhere, a gagium is being played 12 strings, trembling with elegance. Sweet teas favored higher tunings. Earthy brews preferred lower notes. Herbalists and musicians often collaborated in what may be history's most poetic version of tea pairing. You follow the sound to a side courtyard. She returns it with a smile like a falling leaf. Not urgent, not shy. Just letting gravity do the work. There, beneath a cherry tree not yet in bloom, a young noblewoman practices. She pauses only when you approach. Would you like to hear the tea song? She asks. You nod. She begins again, this time slower, more fluid. When she finishes, the last note hangs in the air like a sigh that didn't want to end. That song, she says, is played only on days with good tea. One curious belief. In some Goryeo courts, it was customary for musicians to tune their instruments based on the flavor of that morning's blend. Historians still debate whether the tuning actually changed or whether it was all a pleasant illusion, born of steeped roots and mild euphoria. You thank her with a bow. You walk back slowly, your tea now cool, but still carrying the warmth of every hand that held it before you. A single plum blossom drifts onto your shoulder. You don't brush it away. The mid-afternoon hours in the palace are the most peaceful. The ministers are napping. The scribes are nibbling on pine nut candies. The cats, of which there are many, have declared a universal nap accord. There are stone benches and flowering quince trees, their red buds curled like secrets. You find yourself back near the Queen's Garden, a quiet place reserved for reflection, embroidery, and not officially, but inevitably palace gossip. A court lady greets you. Her expression is unreadable in that particularly regal way, but her hands hold a tray. A hint of mint lingers on the steam. This, she says, is Simbanka, the tea of resolution. The cup is small and deep. Inside, an infusion of bamboo leaf, golden bellflower, and a twist of dried tangerine peel. You sip. It tastes like beginnings and endings at the same time. She sits beside you, not speaking for a while, just watching the wind. Finally, she says, "Do you know why tea is served before apologies?" You shake your head. If someone offered you 2 cups, one hot, one warm, they were about to say something they regretted. Or worse, something they hadn't yet decided whether to regret, so that the warmth softens the throat before the truth. But I've steeped them many times. One peculiar practice among Goryeo nobles, but in this moment, you know it doesn't matter. Tea confession. Not a formal ritual, but a recognized social cue. You've received just 1 cup. It's the safe kind. Still, the lady glances at you. There are letters I've never sent, she says. You understand her. Because there are words you haven't said either. But somehow, the tea knows them. Historians still debate how much of this emotional weight was genuine and how much was just a product of refined boredom. You drink. The wind turns a page on an open scroll beside you, and something inside you says, let it be. You're invited to dinner, not a feast, not even a formal meal, but what the palace calls evening calm. A gathering of silence more than of appetite. You walk past the main kitchen courtyard where two cooks are arguing over turnip angles and whose dumplings best resemble an emperor's dignity. Steam rises in lazy spirals. Somewhere, a spoon clangs like a bad decision. You do not get involved. The evening calm takes place in a secluded alcove surrounded by hanging silk screens. Tonight's blend is mellow and grounding. 4 low tables, each set for one. It's the palace's gentlest social rule. You eat near others, but not with them. Proximity, not pressure. Your table holds a single dish of warm congee with chestnuts, a bowl of pickled radish, and of course, a pot of tea. Roasted burdock root for digestion, lotus leaf for sleep preparation, like something that used to grow wild before it volunteered to calm you down. His stack of scrolls leans against his leg like a tired dog. Adzuki bean skin for clarity. The idea was to take in soft food, soft thoughts, and prepare the body to release the burdens of waking logic. Poetry and pickles were optional but encouraged. A whisper of honey water for forgiveness. One major historical fact, Goryeo etiquette emphasized pre-sleep eating as a time of self-reckoning. You sip the tea between bites. It tastes like earth, like endings. No one else is there, just you, the moon, and the water. Across the way, a young scholar chews slowly, eyes half shut. It meant I don't need advice, I just need stillness. No one would comment, but they'd often respond by pouring a bit more tea into your cup, a liquid way of saying me too. One peculiar tradition during such meals, if a noble wished to silently confess a worry, they'd turn their teacup clockwise 3 times before drinking. You turn your cup once, then twice, then let it be. The scent of pine, charcoal, and rain on stone lingers on the wind. You hear crickets, but not many. Even they are being respectful tonight. Later, when the meal is done, you walk through the outer gardens, guided only by lantern glow and instinct. In other words, tea wasn't meant to knock you out. It was meant to slow you down until your thoughts didn't mind being quiet. It's cooler now. The kind of chill that invites shawls, not coats. The path curves toward the spring pavilion, a hexagonal structure perched over a koi pond. You sit. The surface of the pond reflects more than light. You see shadows of ferns, the bend of bamboo, the soft shimmer of the tea house roof. And beside you on a bench, a small thermos. Someone's left you another tea. Tonight's final cup before bed, pear blossom for sweetness, angelica again, for bones, a pinch of Job's tears, for dreams that wander without getting lost. You open the lid. The steam kisses your face. One curious footnote from a Goryeo medical text, to sleep too quickly is to miss the grace of surrender. Historians still debate whether this was poetic or a very slow-acting placebo. But you don't debate anything tonight. You sip. The stars ripple on the water. Your breath slows. And your body begins to remember something it's always known how to let go. You return to your room just before midnight. The doors are slightly ajar. Someone has placed fresh linens, a folded robe, and atop the headrest, a single cotton sachet filled with dried sweet flag and cinnamon bark. It smells like dreams that take their time. The lamp has been dimmed to its lowest setting, and the shadows along the floor seem to tuck themselves in. As you lie back, the wood creaks slightly beneath the mattress. Not a protest, just acknowledgement. The roof above you is painted in winding floral vines faded by time. They look like they're swaying, even though they're still. You exhale long and low. And somewhere just outside the window, you hear a gentle lullaby. A court musician, perhaps. Or the wind pretending to be one. Adults on rail service were often sung to sleep, especially those involved in stressful affairs of state. Even advisors had lullabies. There's record of one chancellor who requested the same melody for 20 years, even after retiring. It was called Song of the Quiet Gate. One major historical detail: Koryo lullabies weren't just for children. You don't know the name of the tune tonight, but it wraps around your spine like silk. It speaks to your bones in soft syllables. One last obscure tidbit: some believed that if you placed your final teacup upside down by the window, the moon would carry away your unanswered questions. You do so now. The cup rests, quietly tipped. The moon approves. Historians still debate whether the moon ever replied, but those who asked always slept better afterward. You adjust the blanket, the pillow welcomes you, your mind softens at the edges, and with your final waking breath, you hear the kettle cooling in the outer hall. Even it has finished its work. The next morning arrives in slow layers, like rice paper unfurling in water. You don't so much wake as you re-enter the world quietly, respectfully, like a guest returning to a long conversation paused mid-sentence. The room is bathed in early light, not sharp, not loud. Just a gentle glow through the paper screens, soft enough to forgive anything you might have dreamed. Outside, a bell chimes once, not for alarm, just for rhythm. You sit up. Her robes are pine green, her face unreadable in that very practiced way that suggests she has once judged a diplomat shoe choice without blinking. Someone has already left a wash basin at your door, and a cup of warm water infused with ginger and quince, the court as unofficial greeting for your liver. You sip. It tastes like resilience and memory. A new attendant greets you with a bow. Each tree is wrapped in silk thread around its trunk, for protection or fashion. No one knows anymore. The trees don't seem to mind. Would you like to take the morning walk of clarity? She asks. You nod. You follow her out into the dew-laced garden. The air smells of damp leaves, old stone, and distant citrus. The walk of clarity is not a ritual exactly, but a pattern, a quiet path through specific palace grounds, designed to move the body without waking the mind too fast. And what they called the sleepy fire in the belly? No one knows what that is, but it sounds important. You pass the plum grove, where white blossoms drift down like polite snowfall. They believed it connected their breath to the spirit of the herb and made them less likely to complain about things like cold feet or existential dread. She simply walks a little ahead, as if guiding you through a memory. One major historical fact: palace physicians in the Joseon Dynasty often prescribed wind walking, short, meditative strolls at dawn to balance blood, breath. You pass a stone tablet inscribed with a poem. Even in stillness, the roots remember the river. The gravel path crunches beneath you like very thoughtful toast. It's unclear who wrote it. Possibly someone trying to delay paperwork. You step carefully, breath slow, each foot placed with intention. The attendant says nothing. One curious tidbit: some members of court would place a dried tea leaf under their tongue during the walk. You consider trying it. but decide instead to simply inhale deeply. The air tastes faintly of lemon and moss. You walk on. By mid-morning, you find yourself in the scripture pavilion, an octagonal room filled with scrolls, silence, and the slow rhythm of ink drying. Here, court scholars transcribe dreams, oaths, treaties, and tea formulas, though which of those they take most seriously depends on the hour. You sit beside one such scribe, a quiet man with a crooked topknot and a teacup so perpetually full it may be more metaphor than vessel. He nods to you but doesn't speak. The table before him holds today's task, copying an ancient tea manual from the southern mountains, the chapter he's working on, Infusions for Truth and Pleasant Forgetting. He slides a copy toward you. You may read, he says, but do not correct it. The errors are part of the recipe. You skim the page. For remembering a name you never spoke aloud, perilla leaf plus rainwater steeped in moonlight. For forgiving your own voice, black garlic plus pear blossom. For when a visitor overstays and you remain polite, roasted chestnut plus silence, one major historical fact. Tea manuals in the Goryeo Dynasty often combine botanical knowledge with emotional guidance. Recipes came with notes like only for grief that has softened or best after funerals, not before. You turn the page and find a sketch of a leaf with 6 fingers. That's either a rare mutation or someone got very sleepy mid-drawing, one peculiar habit of the scribes. The belief was that the faint trace of ink would pass on wisdom to the water. More realistically, it flavored the tea with a touch of poetic mischief. They brewed tea with the scraps of discarded scroll paper. You're offered a cup of this paper tea. It smells like cinnamon and overthinking. You drink. It's not delicious, but it feels like insight. Outside, the wind shifts. A scroll flutters. A cat leaps onto the windowsill and yawns with imperial grace. You bow to the scribe. He nods again as if to say, you've had enough meaning for now. And you leave the pavilion lighter than when you arrived. The afternoon stretches on, slow and silken, like someone gently pulling a ribbon through time. You find yourself drifting toward the ink garden, a quiet court tucked behind the East Library, known mostly to scholars, monks, and those who need space to remember things softly. The garden is mostly stone paths and moss. A few bamboo shoots grow here and there, as if chosen by the wind itself. The stone is cool, grounding. Monks once ground ink here while reciting prayers. Now, it's more a place for reflection. Or, as one court poet once called it, a puddle for regret, stirred daily. There's a small stream running through it, not rushing, just murmuring, like an old man talking to his favorite bowl. In the center sits an inkstone pool carved centuries ago. You sit on a smooth bench, but not too much. A boy appears with a tray. You're not surprised. The tray holds a small teacup, a brush, and a folded paper crane. The tea today, he says quietly, is for memory of sweetness. You smile. That's all anyone wants, isn't it? Today's infusion. Before composing certain scrolls, a scribe would steep a blend and offer it to the air so the ink would not go unwitnessed. Schizandra berries, for 5 flavors in one fruit, inside. You trace it to a corridor lined with hanging gongs, each tuned differently. The court uses this passage in moments of deep uncertainty. Burnt rice for humility. Whichever gong resonated as they passed was said to reflect their heart's clarity or lack thereof. Pine flower for breath. Cinnamon twig because the weather is moody. One major historical fact. In Goryeo, Korea, tea wasn't only about medicine. It was also used as an offering in writing rituals. You sip. The tea is complicated, like someone who once tried to write a love poem and ended up inventing taxes. The boy leaves the paper crane behind. You unfold it gently. Sometimes the forgetting is the tea. One gong sings a low, mellow tone. Another shivers, barely audible. Either way, the corridor remains, and so does the habit. You're not sure what it means, but you're sure it's true. Not to answer questions, but to make them quieter. As you rise from the bench, you follow the sound of a wind chime, delicate, slightly uneven. They call it the Hall of Shifting Sound, one peculiar tradition. When court officials were unsure of a decision, they would walk through this corridor sipping tea. You are offered another small cup. It is cool, not hot. This blend is different. White chrysanthemum for vision, licorice root for grounding, goji berry for balance, a single grain of salt to remind you that not all sweetness is free. You walk slowly, each step soft. The wind stirs. The tea rests on your tongue. A string of thoughts you can't quite organize trails behind your steps. Historians still debate whether the musical corridor had any real effect on decisions, or if it was simply a method to delay declarations. At the end of the path, you bow toward a bronze bell. The tea has done its work. Evening returns slowly, like a page being turned by a breeze that's read the story before. You return to your quarters, the moon rising like an elder above the palace walls. The sky wears a soft violet, and the stars peep out one by one, like polite guests waiting to be introduced. A new tray awaits you on the threshold. No bells, no bows, just the quiet certainty of routine. Tonight's pre-sleep tea. Jujube, always mugwort for dreams of ancestors, roasted millet for warmth, a trace of pear skin for softness in the chest. The cup is smaller than before. Not because the tea has less to say, but because you need fewer words now. One final historical fact. If your blend was too bitter, the day had been imbalanced. If too sweet, perhaps something had been avoided. The ideal tea, complex, calm, and incomplete. It was believed that each night's tea carried the spirit of the day it followed. You drink. The flavor is gentle, a note held just long enough to remember where it came from. A final scroll sits beside your pillow. Unrolled, it reads, "Sleep well, beloved leaf. You curled when you needed to. You reached when it was time. No signature, but you know the hand." One obscure habit of Goryeo herbalists. When a favored tea was no longer needed, they would burn the last of its herbs in silence, never steeping it again. To think the remedy and release it, you light the tiniest sprig of mugwort. It smolders, fragrant and light. Then you lie down. You do not think. You do not plan. You only listen to the last few heartbeats of the fire as they nestle into the quiet. The blanket is light, the floor solid, the sky vast. The tea has said everything. Now it is your turn to rest. It's deep into the night now. The palace has curled inward. Even the cats, usually nocturnal philosophers, have vanished into folds of silk and shadow. Here, a single moon window opens to the sky, letting in a sliver of light so gentle it seems more imagined than cast. No robes, no tools, just her and a wooden cup. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. You sit once more in the moonlight chamber, a quiet alcove meant only for end-of-day tea. The herbalist joins you again. Tonight's final blend is almost invisible. Ginger leaf. For protection, you drink it slowly, as if listening for something you forgot to remember. Camellia blossom for patience, ash bark for letting go, a breath of wind-dried rice straw for silence. It's steeped barely 3 minutes. The water is hot, but the tea is shy. Others are for remembering that you don't need to be healed. She holds out a tiny lacquered box. Inside, dried herbs bound with string, folded silk, and one tiny scroll. You unroll it carefully. It says, "Some teas are for healing." You nod. One final fact: the Goryeo court kept no record of failed teas. If a blend didn't soothe, it was not catalogued, forgotten, not as failure, but as kindness. Tonight, your herbalist opens the window, releases a pinch of leaf, as are you. One peculiar tradition: herbalists sometimes gifted their least useful tea to the wind scattered into the air, to teach the sky something soft. The moon catches it mid-flight, and just like that, the tea is done. You bow, she bows. The air is lighter now. You step back toward your room, and with each step, the world begins to blur. Gently, your final rest is not in your chamber, but in the sleeper's pavilion, a sanctuary of woven reeds, open-air stillness, and the hush of crickets doing their best. Only the truly weary are sent here, or the truly quiet. The bed is a mat of mulberry silk layered with cotton, and a blanket filled with tea-infused wool. Yes, that's real. The court tried it once during a particular long winter, and now it's a tradition. There is no teacup tonight, only the warmth of earlier sips lingering inside your chest. A musician sits nearby, quietly tuning a single-stringed geomungo. They will not play unless requested. Silence is just as sacred. You lie down. A reed screen rolls down across the pavilion's open wall, filtering moonlight into ribbons. One major detail about the Goryeo court: so all sleepers were encouraged to face east, open to west, and let the lunar calm pull the spine downward like a tide. They believed that the body absorbed moonlight more efficiently if the skin was at rest. In the morning, they would read them only if the dreams were kind. One odd custom: sleepers wrote notes to their future selves and placed them under their pillows. You write one now. Just a few words, folded twice, tucked in gently. No one will read it but you. Outside, the breeze wraps the garden. The crickets continue, the stars lean closer, and the geomungo remains unplayed. Because this night doesn't need a song. It already is one. At dawn, the sleeper's pavilion is filled with the softest light imaginable. Light so gentle it knocks before entering. Light so delicate it doesn't disturb dreams, it finishes them. You wake, but only barely. A hand touches your shoulder featherlight. An attendant. She carries a scroll and a small bowl of warm water, scented faintly with plum kernel and licorice. You sip. You breathe. You sit up slowly, as if disentangling from mist. Eyes fluttered at the second gong, breath aligned with north wind. The scroll? It's your sleep record notes taken by the calm attendants through the night. Heart steady, dreams deep, no spoken words. Especially during long diplomatic missions or illnesses, the quality of rest was viewed as a matter of public record. They've written your rest like poetry. One major historical truth: sleep records were sometimes included in state archives. One lesser-known fact: some noble families had hereditary lullabies, passed down with strict cadence and key, believed to keep the soul from wandering too far during slumber. You ask if yours was sung. The attendant smiles. It was hummed. You nod. And everything inside you nods too. The last tea of your journey isn't given, it's grown. You are led to the herbal court garden, a private section of the palace where the queen's herbalists grow the rarest plants. Morning dew clings to each leaf. The beds are lined in moss, and the paths are carved with names. You are given a small pot, some loam, and a cutting of jangmol, a plant said to respond to human emotion, not with blooming, but with rooting. You plant it yourself, quietly. The soil is warm, your hands do not hesitate. You mark the pot not with a name, but with a breath. The attendant ties a red string to it. This, she says, will remember you. One curious custom. So plants were grown in their honor to preserve the memory of peace. Goryeo courts believe that visitors who slept well in the palace left a part of their key behind. You bow to the garden. The plants do not move, but they understand. The last tea of your journey isn't given, it's grown. You are led through a narrow stone path, beyond the scent of jasmine and fermented soy, to the quietest part of the royal grounds. Here, the palace breathes softer, time hums slower. This is the herbal court garden hidden behind lattice screens and wind chimes carved with prayers. No guards, no ceremony, only a stillness so complete it hushes the sound of your own footsteps. The garden is older than memory. Beds of moss cradle the earth like velvet. The air is cool and clean, perfumed with hints of angelica, ginseng, and mountain pine. Everything here grows on purpose. An elderly attendant greets you without words. She is draped in soft gray robes, her hair held in a simple loop by a pin carved from plum wood. In her hands, a rare, translucent veined herb that does not bloom in the presence of beauty, but in the presence of sincerity. A plant that roots only when the hands holding it mean it. A small clay pot. It is warm and slightly fragrant like rain-soaked bark and ancestral homes. The cutting is passed to you carefully. You feel the subtle pulse of life in its stem, not dramatic, but there. A bowl of dark loam and a cutting of jangmol. You've heard of it in stories. You are asked to kneel. No ceremony, yet it feels sacred. You press the loam into the pot with your fingers. You plant it yourself, slowly, quietly. The wind pauses as if watching. Then comes the marking. You are not asked to write your name. Instead, the attendant instructs you to close your eyes and exhale softly once over the plant. As if sharing your spirit with it, a red silk thread is tied around the pot's neck, each with its own thread, its own breath. Silent, steady witnesses to years of quiet visits. Some cuttings have flourished into low green bushes, soft as memory. Others remain small, stubborn, rooted. This, she says, will remember you. You sit back on your heels, not in their rooms, but in the garden. The calm you found here, this plant will keep it. It will grow piece from piece. The moment is still, unfinished, yet whole. She speaks again, her voice like silk folded for generations. It is said that visitors who sleep well in the palace leave behind a part of their key. She gestures around. You notice them now, hundreds of similar pots along the walls and walkways. You rise, the plants do not move, but somehow they feel awake. Before leaving, you bow, not to the palace, not to the attendant, but to the pot, to the piece of yourself that now lives here, and the garden does not answer, but it understands. And now the world is yours again. You step beyond the gate, past the final lantern, past the last stone curve of the palace wall. It does not feel like departure, only like exhale. The palace does not disappear, it fades. Not as buildings do, but as songs do, lingering not in form, but in feeling. It becomes a rhythm under your skin, a warmth in the ribcage, a steam rising long after the sip is gone. The road is wide. The sky is different here, brighter, noisier, perhaps even impatient, but you do not rush. You've forgotten how. You carry no bags, but you are not empty. Your hands remember stillness, your breath remembers pace, and your body, once pulled by hours and errands, now moves to a different measure. You walk like silence, you blink like thought, you listen even to things that do not speak. The wind stirs your sleeve, the dust curls behind your step. You pass others, travelers, and townspeople and merchants, their arms full and their eyes forward. Some smile politely, some don't notice you at all, but once you might have hurried too. Now you choose not to. You've learned how to sip like it matters. At a bend in the path, a small tea house stands, weathered, humble, a single stool outside. You sit not from tiredness, but because the sun has painted the step golden and it feels worth noticing. The host doesn't ask what you want, he simply brings you a cup. It's not like the palace teas, it's coarse, simple, earthy, but it is warm and real. You hold it between your hands, let it rest. The flavor is kind, not sharp, not proud, just kind. You drink slowly, not because you must, but because you can. The cup empties, almost, and then you stop. One last saying from the court returns to you, soft and playful. The strongest tea is the one you don't finish. You smile. It makes no logical sense, but it doesn't need to, because you understand now. You leave the last sip in the cup, not out of waste, but out of reverence. A tiny gift to the moment, a bow to the space between what is offered and what is accepted. You stand, no applause, no farewell, no ceremonial goodbye. Just a breeze, just the world waiting. You walk on. The path bends forward. The future stretches quiet and unwritten. But in your step there is memory. In your pause there is grace. And in your cup, though left unfinished, there is peace. And so you carry everything, even in your empty hands. You lie in your own bed now, maybe not in a palace, maybe not in Korea, but your body remembers. The softness of the cushion beneath you, the curve of your shoulders letting go, the heat of a wooden cup in your palms, and the scent of something floral and distant. Let those memories wrap around you like steam. Let them blur the edges of your day. In this quiet, you are not required to fix, perform, or remember anything. You're only required to rest. The kettle has been emptied. The moon has begun its descent. The leaves have curled inwards, just like you. Breathe in slowly and out. Let each breath be its own cup of tea, warm, healing, unnoticed by the world, but known deeply by you. You've walked through gardens. You've learned the weight of herbs, the hush of ink, the music of wooden corridors. You've remembered that softness is not weakness and silence is not empty. And now, you have nothing left to do. There's no next step, only the one where you sleep. Let your thoughts drift like petals in water. Let your heartbeat find the rhythm of the reed chimes. And let the last words you hear tonight be these. You were steeped with care. You were held by time. You may rest now.